you at BBC, so do stay with us for that. You're watching BBC News. A massive earthquake hits the northeast coast of Japan, measuring 8.9 and triggering a tsunami.
It's one of the largest earthquakes to hit Japan for many years, causing widespread damage to homes and offices across Tokyo.
At least 26 people are killed, many more still missing as a refinery fire along the coast burns out of control.
The quake causes a giant whirlpool off the eastern coast of Japan. A tsunami warning has now been widened to cover the Pacific Basin.
This is BBC News. We're bringing you ongoing coverage of the huge earthquake that struck off the northeast coast of Japan, killing at least 26 people, many more reported missing.
Well, the quake measured 8.9, its epicenter lying around 250 miles north of Tokyo. It triggered a 10-meter tsunami that swept inland at the port of Sendai, destroying everything in its path, sending ships crashing into the shore, tearing down buildings and swamping large areas of farmland.
Mass evacuations are taking place in Japan itself, as well as in countries that lie on the Pacific coast. Tsunami alerts have been triggered in Australia, Russia, Mexico, Hawaii and Peru.
The moment the earthquake struck, 2:46 in the afternoon, local time in Japan. This is a local government office in the city of Sendai. This, the offices of Japan's public broadcaster in the same city. There were several powerful aftershocks within the hour. In a country all too used to earthquakes, the shock at the magnitude of this one all too obvious as people spilt out onto the streets of Japan's cities and tried to comfort one another. The earthquake was off the northeastern coast and the tsunami unleashed by it swept inland. In its path, cars, boats, even buildings, debris of all kinds. Fires were triggered as it advanced. It's being described as the biggest earthquake to hit Japan in 140 years. Here, a boat in a harbour finds itself caught in a whirlpool created by the earthquake. An oil refinery burns out of control just outside the capital. As yet, no one's even begun to assess the economic cost of the disaster.
I offer my deepest sympathy to the people who have suffered the disaster. Regarding our nuclear power facilities, some of the nuclear power plants have stopped automatically, but so far, no radioactive material or radiation has been confirmed to have been leaked to the outside. There has been no information of those lines so far. And given the situation, an emergency disaster response headquarters has been set up with myself as the head.
This was the scene in Parliament when the earthquake struck. Reports say power was disrupted to more than 4 million buildings in Tokyo and its suburbs. Transport has been severely disrupted too. This was the airport in Sendai as it became inundated. Flights have been halted elsewhere, trains too. Military planes were scrambled to help in assessing the damage. For now, Japan is still trying to take in the scale of this disaster, with many of the countries in the entire Pacific region on alert for its potential impact on them too. And the death toll is rising. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News.
Well, a short while ago we spoke to our Tokyo correspondent Roland Burke for the latest from Japan.
That whirlpool was off the coast of Ibaraki, which is on Japan's Pacific coast to the north of Tokyo, so something that was caused by the tsunami. Here in Tokyo, we're seeing lots of people trying to walk home. Public transport has been suspended. It is now dark here. It's early evening. So people, many of whom have spent much of the afternoon down in the streets, in the city squares, outside their offices, feeling a whole series of aftershocks that we felt too. they are now trying to think about how to get home. And the Prime Minister of Japan has said that he's set up an emergency response team within the government that he's leading, and he's asked the people of Japan to remain cautious and vigilant and calm.
And just in terms of that suspension of public transport, is that a power issue or is that just a precautionary issue because of aftershocks and so on?
It's a precautionary issue. Some of the mobile phone networks are down, but the power is still on in Tokyo. It didn't seem to go out here in the city. The expressways, Tokyo is crisscrossed by expressways that are up pretty high. They're up on flyovers, about sort of 5 or 6 stories high. Those have been closed as well, so there's pretty much gridlock in terms of the traffic. And inside office buildings, many of which are dozens and dozens of stories high. There are lots of skyscrapers in this city. All the elevators, the lifts have been shut off as well. So people have had to walk down from their offices.
And Roland, a lot of people we've been speaking to giving their sensation essentially of an earthquake and describing it really like the motion of a ship, a rolling motion. Perhaps you can give us an insight into how it actually feels when an earthquake of that size hits.
Well, when it first hit, I thought I was about to pass out, actually. I felt kind of, my legs were wobbly, and you have a sort of strange moving sensation. But then it very quickly became apparent it was an earthquake, and you could see the panic in the faces of other people around. And it really, this one, sometimes they jerk a bit, the small tremors we had, but this one was a real rolling motion, just like a ship at sea. It went on for a pretty long time, but what was most scary anyway was hearing the creaking and the cracking from the buildings above as they swayed, these big tall skyscrapers. But looking around, the buildings in Tokyo have stood up very well to the effects of the earthquake here, although this of course isn't the epicenter.
No, but in terms of the buildings, clearly no stranger to seismic activity, the whole of Japan. These buildings presumably are designed with earthquakes in mind and designed in some ways to move, to have some give in them.
Yeah, that is the idea. There are pretty strict building codes in place in Japan. They were made more strict after the Kobe earthquake in the 1990s. So the buildings are designed to stand up to it. But if you look inside the buildings, I'm standing on the balcony of an office, and inside everything that was on shelves, on the walls, on people's desks, that's all been thrown off onto the floor. So you can really see the power of it in there. And around the city there are a few places where there had been fires as well, started by the earthquake. But the real thing that people are watching, and they're seeing it on the big advertising TV hoardings that characterize Tokyo, is that tsunami hitting further to the north, the great wave of mud and debris sweeping across fields and greenhouses and carrying cars and some buildings and ships with it.
And what people are looking for, I suppose, is reassurance from the government that they are doing all that they can, that they are monitoring and assessing the situation and sending the relevant help. Is that kind of faith in the government likely to be justified?
Well, there was some criticism after the Kobe earthquake that the government's response wasn't quite good enough. Certainly there are plans in place, and the government's sort of emergency response has been started. There are military planes that have been flying over the affected areas, having a look at the damage. There were helicopters very quickly up in the air above Tokyo. But I can tell you what's a more immediate concern, I think, to me, certainly, and probably to many other people in this city, is the aftershocks. So feeling lots of trembles happening and jiggling about of buildings, and you can see the aerials on top of the buildings swaying a bit. And when you felt the ground really rolling, like it did earlier this afternoon, then you lose faith that it's going to stay still. So when you feel a bit of a jiggle in the ground, you worry that maybe another big quake is on the way.
And we've been watching, Roland, these dramatic pictures, of course, of the tsunami and the impact further up the coast from you. We've seen the water powering in, taking all that debris with it, which, of course, is going to cause so much havoc and as it batters other buildings. Do we know whether this water is still on the move? These pictures clearly from some time ago. Does it eventually run out of steam? What's your understanding? Well,
certainly in the Indian Ocean tsunami, and I was there when that happened and experienced that firsthand. There was a wave. There were several sort of surges that came in, but all at one point in time. At the moment, Japan has a tsunami warning system that's in place, and looking on the TV screens, there's a map of the country, and it is still in place for the entire Pacific coast of Honshu and Hokkaido, the big islands of Japan, and right down towards the far south as well. So there's a warning in place that another tsunami might come. But of course, nobody can be certain what will happen, and already the north has been hit by a big tsunami.
That was Roland Burke speaking to us just a short while ago from Tokyo.
Of course, it's drawing huge international attention. The British Prime Minister David Cameron, who's in Brussels at the moment for an EU summit, has been speaking about the events in Japan. He spoke just a short while ago.
Can I first of all say that the first thing we should be thinking about today is sending our sympathies and our condolences to the Japanese people. We've had a terrible reminder of the destructive power of nature, and everyone should be thinking of that country and their people, and I've asked immediately that our government should look at what we can do to help.